Okay, Emily, taking a look at your submission. I'm just going to give you thoughts off the top of my head, and I'll probably break it down like section by section here.
Monday night, fly to Brussels.
Okay, so I'll just start with this section here.
Monday night.
And we'll talk mostly about Autumn, of course.
Monday night, fly to Brussels.
Their big thing.
Monday night.
So, the one thing that's like standing out to me the most, this is nice. You have like kind of a nice line of action here, you know? But it's a little like pelvis forward in this pose, which has like certain connotations and stuff like that. And then when you turn the character, there's also like not a lot of change happening in the overall kind of like posture or silhouette of the character. So it feels kind of odd to me. So maybe if you're starting here, you know, in this like, this is a very familiar kind of like buddy pose. You know, maybe you want them to be kind of like leaning in more to that character. Sorry, okay, it's a little hard to see because it's just maybe consider like having a different kind of like starting pose so that when you go to this turned away pose, you have something that's a little bit more contrasted, right? So I don't know if they're familiar enough with each other where you would want to be like leaned forward or leaned in, or maybe, you know, always think about like where you're going. If we're going to something that kind of has that C shape, maybe it would be nicer to start off something like this, you know, that's kind of like how they're talking, so that you get something that's a little bit more like in opposition of where you're going. That would work. And I know that they're flying and everything, but like if they're always in like a strong C shape, then it's going to kind of like rob you of the ability to have contrast. You know, like the C shape, especially here where they're kind of like low down, maybe it should feel like a little bit more grounded. Hard to say exactly, but anyways, that's a suggestion for that first bit. And then when you turn, then they're actually going to be like contrasted to how they were before. And I think that that's going to make a little bit, the audience is going to be able to notice it a little bit more when that rotation and turn happens. It's going to feel a little less odd that they're rotating, but their silhouette is almost remaining identical in those both poses. And it's also maybe going to clean up any misunderstanding about kind of like what this pelvis forward looking attitude conveys. And I know that Autumn is flying and all that, but maybe something like this would be better.
Monday night.
Also, when this the second thing I wanted to talk about is when this character gestures night, Monday night. It's nice to have an emphasis on that line, where it's perfectly okay to have an emphasis on that line. Like, this is a really great pose and posture. You know what I mean? But when they say night, the part of their body that's moving the most is this, like they're gesturing with their feet or the lower half of their body, which feels a little odd. I would think that it would be like more based on reality of, I know that this is a flying character, so I don't want to say like we're married exactly to how a terrestrial locked character would say it, but maybe it would make more sense to have them kind of like gesture more with their upper body and their lower body kind of stays. Or even if their upper body doesn't do much and you're just kind of like gesturing more with their hand or arm, you know, than with their lower body. Something like that feels maybe a little more relatable, I guess, is maybe how I would say it, to like what your audience is used to experiencing in their day-to-day. Maybe something like just like a little thing like that. You know what I mean?
Night. Fly to Brussels.
Okay, and then let's talk about this fly to Brussels. So I'm not sure exactly where your character is going to be starting from. Let's assume that they're starting. I'm going to assume that you like my note about not gesturing with the legs, but either way, I think the concept of this next note will make sense, hopefully, regardless of whether you like that or don't like that, whether you follow it or don't follow it, which is up to you. You're the director, of course, of your own thing. So when this character wants to fly up here, this feels really great. Like you have this nice line of action, and then the legs like kind of catch up, right? Like if the feet are here, again, I feel like the character maybe is growing a little bit in scale. Like maybe their feet should be more like here. I don't know. Like that model sheet suggestion hopefully will help kind of like track this stuff, like how big is the character, or how big should the character should be. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about was when you're flying this character up, you know, it's kind of important to track like the waist and maybe like lead with the upper body and have the lower body like remain more like where it was for the first couple frames, you know what I mean? And then as you're flying up, you really want to watch like what is my center doing, because that should be the thing that's like consistently moving up. You know, I don't know if you want to anticipate the center of gravity down slightly before you start your journey up here, but if you do or you don't, we kind of want spacing on this like growing, right? So you have to like track your cog as it's moving up and like really try to like tie it down to where you want it to be. So if you're winding up here, you know, you want that like at least a hint of an ease in and an ease out on this move. And then you want the legs and stuff to catch up last, which I feel like you're demonstrating here in your poses. But it would be nice maybe as you start to have the legs catch up that maybe like there's like a bend in the knees a little bit, you know what I mean, as they're catching up, and then the bottom half is the thing that comes underneath last. You know, like imagine the full anatomy of the character underneath the large skirt, if that's indeed what it is, to try to keep it like kind of consistent so that you get like this really nice motion of zipping up into place, and then the feet, which are like, I'll switch to a different color, like feet are here, and then finally the feet wind up here. So, and these drawings aren't like the timing that I would want, but it's more just trying to describe the motion that I think you would want.
Monday night.
Alright, so that's that section done. Sorry, felt like a lot. Let's look at the next section.
Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday morning. Wow.
This is really nice. This like gesturing, or like the focus and attention being away from winter.
Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday morning.
But I feel like for your character, and maybe I'm wrong, but we could start doing breakdowns for this turn. I like how you're starting and leading with the head. It's really nice. But if we're starting like, if we're kind of winding up, so how do I describe this? If we're winding up here, yikes, I did not mean to move it, so pardon me. Kind of winding up with this being the attitude of the head, right? And we're starting with, come on, move. this being the attitude of the head, like you have to in between these two attitudes, because what I'm seeing is like this one, all of a sudden like the nose is like shooting way up and then going down again. And it's true we want to describe arcs with our head turns and stuff, but this one's pretty extreme, you know what I mean? So maybe instead of having the nose shoot way up, you know, it might make more sense to like have a little like downward swoop on the nose, because we're going to want to be tracking like the nose on all of these moves, right? Anyways, that's just a suggestion. But I do like how you're starting to lead with the head. We'd kind of also want to see that same thing here, which like maybe the torso gets there first and the head gets there first, but maybe the legs could still be like kind of catching up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like maybe they're not all the way, like they're like also a little bit dragging behind and then they float forward like this. And again, I feel like the character keeps like growing, especially the lower half of the character feels a lot larger here than it did when we started the piece. So try to keep those volumes and everything like consistent. Try to just remove this big hair mass, because I find that like really distracting and like understanding the quality of your emotion on the main body.
Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday morning.
And it would be nice,
On to Dusseldorf Wednesday.
you know, with that turn happens really fast. And with this character, you want to think about like, well, what's the motion of this character? I feel like this character is a very like flowy, archy kind of character when they move. So we should try to build that in too to the turn. Like it should be like a very floaty, archy turn. So maybe after they turn, they're still kind of like, their cog is still kind of moving this way gently, or maybe it's like doing this and heading down gently and starting to like, you know, draw like little beautiful arcs in space. So that, because here it feels like the character like turns, kind of just like their cog like kind of locks in place, and I don't get this like floaty sense out of them through this section.
Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday morning. Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday morning.
Yeah, but I like all the ideas here, you know. It's just about getting like the spacing and the timing and everything like worked out.
Then on to Dusseldorf Wednesday.
Cool, let's move on to the next section.
Wow, busy schedule. What do you do?
Cool, I'm going to focusing on Autumn for this little move.
Busy schedule. What do you do?
That looks great. This feels like a huge spacing jump for the legs to come from like over the head to underneath her already. So maybe you want to like figure out that motion like in between, you know, like maybe we see like a frame like this where like, you know, her knees are bent, and she's starting to like bring her legs kind of in and around and underneath her, like, or them, sorry again if I misgender your characters, it's not intentional, I assure you. You know, to try to get like that spacing kind of sorted out here in the rough stage. So something I would also do to try to draw the audience's eye away from autumn to winter, make sure your audience knows who's speaking, is when they say wow, I would maybe make this wow gesture be this gesture instead, like really big. Do that big gesture first, because what's that's going to do, because right now like she's doing something kind of big right at the same time that he's doing something big. But if you can keep her more still, or Autumn, sorry again, if you can keep Autumn more still, when this character begins to speak, when Winter begins to speak, and then we get this nice big gesture of his hands coming up, then all of a sudden your audience's eye is going to be pulled off of Autumn and onto Winter, which is where you want it. And you want to at least keep it there until your audience acknowledges like, oh, it's Winter speaking now, that other character is speaking now. And then you can have Autumn go into their anticipation to the jump and flying overhead. Like a magician, you always want to control where your audience's eye is looking.
Wow, busy schedule. What do you? Wow, busy schedule.
So that's all I really have to say about that. Moving along.
Then home again for 2 days, then back to bloody New York again. What do you do for a living?
Cool. I think all this is working well.
Then home again for 2 days, then back to bloody New York again. What do you do for?
I would like to see something maybe a little different, because like
then home again for 2 days, then
home for 2 days, but then
back to bloody New York again.
Back to bloody New York again feels like they're almost annoyed, or like, then I got to go back to bloody New York. Like, this schedule is awful, right? I don't think they're complaining about New York specifically, but just like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I have to run around and do all this crazy stuff, right? And so I want to see that attitude reflected in their posture or pose, rather than the minute they're done saying this line, they go into this pose, which feels like doting or attentive, or almost maybe like lovey-dovey, instead of like, oh, look at how crazy my schedule is. Like, this pose doesn't convey to me any like exasperation or annoyance at what they were saying. So I don't think that this pose is the correct choice in this moment, right? Back to bloody, like, this is a great pose for like bloody New York. That's really fantastic what you're doing with the hands. I love that pose. And putting the hands on the hips, that feels like appropriate, you know. That feels great for the bloody New York, but we just don't live in it long enough. We just turn to this, like, it feels like Autumn's looking at Winter like they're a puppy or something, you know what I mean? And so I don't really understand the attitude being conveyed and how it fits in with the dialogue that I've heard. So my suggestion would be to like just keep Autumn kind of in this attitude or this posture, and you know, and then like this jump back like it's a surprise, I think is also not supported by the dialogue, because I don't know why they're like, it looks like there's almost like a little fear reaction as Winter comes forward, that Autumn is like recoiling in fear. And I don't know if that's something intentional, but it looks to me like she's afraid of Winter becoming physical with them. And if that's not what you're intending to say, then I think that we need to make some different choices with the acting here and stuff. This is great. This little thinking posture is really nice. I do like this. So maybe you can go from this annoyed pose here, and what you do while Winter's speaking again is to not steal attention away from where you want the audience's attention to be, is you keep Autumn more still, and they go from this pose into this pose, which I think would work. And I think these hands coming out from underneath the cloak is going to draw your audience's eye here, which is great. That's where you want it. So that's all good, as long as we're keeping Autumn still. And then this going down into this like kind of, this is perfect. I really love this. I don't know. But I would just live in this. I don't think you need to move Autumn out of this into this. Because again, it competes for the audience's attention. And once Autumn gets still here, I would just live in that pose so that the audience can focus on Winter's reaction here of the face palm. And I would just end your piece with Autumn being more or less in this pose. You can live within this pose. Like maybe Autumn opens their eyes, you know, and can at least like see what Winter does at the end of the piece. But I feel like right now there's just, both characters are moving a lot at the same time, and it's very hard to know like where to look. All right, that's the big picture right there. But I want to keep, every time I see this like progress, makes me happy. So keep on it. try to find time to get it more resolved for next week and the following weeks, you know, because like time will run out before we know it, and I really want to see this like pushed to a resolution if possible. All right, I hope you're having a good week, Emily. See you in class.